Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Arlene Sweeting, and I'm part of the management team here at WSLR+Fogartyville. And today is a big day for the nonprofits in our community, as is the start of the Giving Partner Challenge at noon today. And one of the ideas that the Community Foundation had for this year's Giving Challenge was that nonprofits could host pop-up giving stations. And Fogartyville had been looking at doing that with some of our partnering not-for-profits. But the coronavirus kind of threw a monkey wrench into that. But we decided we wanted to go ahead and get together anyway and have a conversation of it's in our community to our virtual live stream today. First up, we have Justin Bloom with Suncoast Waterkeepers. And Justin and Andy Melee were actually hosting a program for a short while here at WSLR. So welcome, Justin.
Good morning.
Good morning. We have Rebecca Bray from Transition Sarasota joining us this morning. Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning, Arlene. Morning, Justin.
Tracy Troxler is joining us from Sunshine Community Composting.
Good morning, everyone. Hi.
Morning, we have Jean Jones from the Florida Veterans for Common Sense.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. What a beautiful day, huh?
Hi, welcome.
So we're going to get started just by having each of you share how the work of your organization is related to climate change. And why don't we start with Tracy?
Okay, great. Well, I'm with Sunshine Community Compost, and we create education and action programs that get people involved in composting and local soil regeneration. And these efforts are linked to a lot of different global and local solutions, but specifically they're related to climate change. The first most obvious is that we help keep food scraps out of landfills. And when food scraps go into landfills, they can create really potent greenhouse gas emissions called methane as a result of anaerobic processes. And we're also, when we find that when people learn how to compost, they start becoming aware of food waste, and they start measuring the amount of food coming in and going out of their households. And there's a lot of impacts around food waste and climate change. So we see that as a positive impact. And also when people start composting and we compost at larger scales and get compost integrated into our landscapes, we can draw down carbon from the atmosphere and also help reduce some of the impacts of climate change, specifically around extreme weather events and that kind of thing. So those are some of the ways that we are related to climate change. And we teach in communities so that we are talking about composting with communities and then linking composting to other global issues like climate change. So that's really where we're at with our connections.
Great. Justin, talk to us a little bit about Suncoast Waterkeepers and the work you do.
Thanks, Arlene. Yeah, we're involved in a number of efforts that address climate change. I think Suncoast Waterkeepers is best known for our aggressive advocacy and our litigation, but we're also involved in citizen science and education. I think when it comes to climate change, our advocacy is important, and in some cases our litigation efforts, which have borne success. There are three areas in particular. Fossil fuels has been an area of interest of Suncoast Waterkeeper and other waterkeepers around the world. We've been working to oppose offshore oil, particularly off the coasts of Florida, in coalition with other organizations. We've been engaged in litigation specifically against coal-fired power plants, particularly Big Bend in Tampa Bay. And also, along with other groups, have been opposing fracking in Florida. The other areas in coastal resilience. We have taken positions against certain dredging projects where I think a lot of the coastal projects are kind of short-sighted and haven't really embraced infrastructure planning for sea level rise and climate change. So we've been trying to support coastal protections that build that principle in, and also importantly protecting wetlands as we can anticipate sea level rise and stronger inundations of rain related to climate change, and challenging certain construction in coastal areas which are a danger to coastal waterways and our fragile shorelines. Most importantly, I think directly on the topic of infrastructure, we've been involved in litigation to enforce the Clean Water Act. In Sarasota County in particular, the sewage infrastructure was not complying with the Clean Water Act. It's directly related to climate change because with greater rainfall, higher sea level rises, our infrastructure was not doing its job, and stormwater finding its way into our sewage infrastructure. We have forced the county to invest significantly in their sewage infrastructure, which is really going to help down the road when we start seeing the increasing impacts of climate change.
And we thank you for that work, looking out for the quality of our water. Rebecca, jump on in here and let us know about the work of Transition Sarasota.
Thanks, Arlene. So Transition Sarasota, like Sunshine Community Compost, is highly focused on food waste and educating the community around that topic. We add in the value of using recovered food to feed our hungry populations. So Transition's big initiative is to harvest excess produce from area farms. We have several farm partners that we do that with, and we're always looking for more. And then we take volunteers out, bringing community together through volunteer activism, and then the food gets donated to the food bank. So we form that connection between the farm and helping supply some of that labor to get food to the food bank and feed hungry people. So as Tracy discussed, food breaking down in the landfill has terrible ramifications because it creates greenhouse gases. Likewise, we're trying to get it, instead of breaking down in fields as well, if we can get that food to hungry people or to hungry animals and reduce it at the source, we're really going to have a higher impact. But we work with a lot of these other nonprofits too, Tracy in particular, to educate our community around food waste. And we love hearing about what's going on with Suncoast Waterkeeper and Jean and everybody. So we're excited to be here and excited to be tackling food waste.
All right. Jean Jones, Florida Veterans for Common Sense. How
Arlene,
are you guys involved with climate change?
Well, Arlene, first I'd like to thank you for inviting us to be involved with this project, which is terrific, and the other nonprofits that we have the opportunity to work with in the Sarasota area. It's just, we're really fortunate. I'll say on the climate change issue, our group realized years ago, along with the Department of Defense, that climate change was a major national security issue. So we've been beating that drum for years. And we also saw that there was a need to help veterans. As many people know, if you look around a little bit, there's a lot of homeless veterans and other problems with the veterans community. And so we were trying to figure out a way that we could work on issues like climate change and also help our fellow veterans. So we came up with the idea first of Green Path Veterans Farm, which we started. And of course, a farm has a lot to do with climate change because conventional agriculture, believe it or not, contributes a lot to the carbon load in the environment. So we started that project, and now we've it was a successful project, which we transferred to another separate 501c3, which is just terrific, and it's doing very well. So we've continued these type of creative processes, thinking about climate change and how we can help veterans at the same time. We have a project underway right now, which is very exciting. We call SURF, and it's a cooperation between the Rotary Club of Sarasota Bay, our separate 501c3 that we set up to help the veterans, Florida Veterans for Common Sense Fund, and START, the organization that works to end red tide in Sarasota. And it's an urban reforestation project. Now, unfortunately, we were all set to go with a big kind of splash to get some trees planted. We were getting all set to do that. And unfortunately, this COVID situation has put a stop on that for right now. But that's going to happen as soon as we can get back out and do that work. And then we also have a film, video, and photography project, Veterans in Focus. And Veterans in Focus already is working with other nonprofits in the community to make videos about environmental issues, and they were they just did one video about the work that's being done to clean up some of the lakes and slow down the nitrogen and the phosphorus that goes into our water. So that's just terrific work. It's in my view, a creative way to help veterans with these entrepreneurial projects and also address the issue of climate change. So we think we're on the right track, but if anybody has suggestions, we're always open to them.
Great. Thank you, Jean. And I'm happy to say Elizabeth Pickett-Gray was able to join us from the Florida Environmental Film Festival. So
Hi
there. Good morning.
I'm not very good at this, but we're new, and I'm not really used to being in front of the camera. I'm used to being behind the camera. But Florida Environmental Film Festival started because we felt there was a need for environmental films in Florida to help with the environment. And our mission is to provide environmental films, educational debates, and broaden knowledge on conservation topics affecting Florida's Gulf Coast. And that's basically what we do right now. We had a festival that was going to be happening at Rainley College March 11th, but because of COVID, that we had to postpone that. And basically, that's
Great. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So we wanted to talk a little bit this morning about the relatedness of the COVID-19 pandemic and the climate crisis. I haven't heard a lot of conversation around this, but both of these issues really give us a chance to rethink our economic model, really force us into rethinking our economic model. And we have a choice to make now, right? Do we just address the one crisis, the public health crisis that's right in front of us right now, or do we take this opportunity to tackle both of these crises together and perhaps come out on the other side with a more just, more sustainable, healthier planet for all of us? And I haven't imagined that we're all on the same page on that, but I want to talk a little bit about that with all of you and how we go about doing that, right? Because with climate change, we've seen a lot of denial and complacency, right, in trying to move forward and do the things that need to be done to address this issue. We've seen a little bit of that at the beginning and along the way with the COVID-19 situation as well. So what are your thoughts about how we can seize this opportunity presented by the crisis that we're in right now to move forward and come out on the other side with a brighter future for all of us?
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, as much as we've been denying climate change, I think there's a lot of undeniable proof that we've been seeing around the world right now. Wildlife coming back in the canals of Venice, the sky being bluer in LA. And unfortunately, we're always going to have people that disagree. But I think that the wake-up call, and I definitely hope that the wake-up call is there for some. Around food-related, we've really seen a lot of the food waste and the flaws in our system, especially with the little guy farmers having to overturn crops, milk being dumped on a really incredible level. And I think that at least on the food side, what I am seeing a lot of those really strong connections being built that I hope will last through this time of crisis. And Transition Sarasota speaks to that. I mean, we did a homepage takeover in partnership with the University of Florida Extension Office to try and put some of the local CSAs on our homepage, just so that for people in community that wanted to support local knew what some of their options were, and especially for the smaller farms that were typically at the farmers market when that closed down. So I think we are building a lot of these connections, and I definitely think that they can last throughout the crisis. And it's just drawing attention to that, to the community, to continue to support those models afterward.
Absolutely. And supporting local farmers is definitely something we can do. And we see folks asking questions all over our community is, what can I do to help? And that's something very, substantial that we can do. And we here at WSLR actually are helping Warden Farm. If the farmers market is closed, we're letting them use our patio to distribute their CSA boxes on Saturdays. So that's been great. Anyone else want to jump in here?
Sure.
Go ahead, Justin.
Well, I think one thing that I've been thinking about is the importance of science. And people are really, I think most people are really understanding the importance of following what we're able to learn from science. And scientists and public health officials in learning how to try to deal with this crisis. And I think that, the climate change crisis overshadows this and many other things, but I think that there's a lot of reluctance to embrace the message of the indisputable science involved. And hopefully people will have more faith and understanding of the importance of science and seeing how that's how we're going to get through this COVID crisis. And I think that's how we're going to get through the crisis as well. So.
Yeah, audio jumped out on us a little bit there, but yes, definitely paying attention to science and letting the data drive our decision making is important in both of these crises, I think. Yeah,
definitely.
Arlene, and for everybody, this COVID crisis there's one opportunity with this crisis, and that opportunity is it lets us recognize, as Justin says, the importance of science and paying attention to what's happening in our world. The COVID situation, it was something nebulous. It was far away. It was in China. It wasn't going to get here. There are all these myths about it. Instead of paying attention to the science, we more or less ignored it for a long time. And then it slapped us in the face. And that's exactly what's happening with climate change. We have a tendency to ignore the science because it's far off. We talk about things that are going to happen in the future, so it's very nebulous. And we just did a seminar on killer heat in Florida. And in Congressional District 16, by mid-century, we're going to have something like 105 days of heat over 105 degrees. And that's what's characterized as killer heat. People die. Well, right now, we're not reacting to that. Some of us are. These groups here are reacting to that because we're paying attention to climate change, but we have to do it as a society. And thinking this through, we have to have some systemic changes, in my opinion. And some of those systemic changes might be, right now, we have over 20 million people that are unemployed. And most of them are sitting home collecting a check. And I'm glad they're collecting a check. Goodness knows they need it. But we could put that creativity of 20 million people to work. And Italy does something that's very interesting that we could learn from. When you're entitled to unemployment, instead of getting a check every week or every month, you can take that as a lump sum. But to get that unemployment as a lump sum, you have to work with 10 other people and form a business plan and form a cooperative. And then all those people can get that unemployment as a lump sum and start a business. And we should be thinking about those type of things in this country. We need to think about our policies. We have the creativity to do it, but when we have a system that seems to be stuck, and we have to change that system. And one thing I love about these groups that are on the show today, like Transition Sarasota, I mean, we're cooperating and we're building cooperatives. With our video project, we intend to build that into a self-sustaining business, which is a veteran cooperative. And those are the kind of things we can be doing in this country, in my opinion, so that all of our lives are better. We can pay attention to science. We can work together well. And the great thing about it, it makes us feel good because we're all friends and working together. So let's go for it.
Yeah, you brought up a lot of issues in that response, Jean, and I certainly am a big supporter of worker-owned cooperatives. Would love to see more of them blossom in Florida. And you also brought up the systemic change that we need to see happen. And, one of the big reasons that your organization and my organization have both signed on to move to amend is because we see the corporate influence in our government is too strong. And it is really one of the roadblocks in making these changes that we need. You look at our healthcare policy, our environmental policy, right across the board, you know, and you see this overwhelming influence of big money and corporations on our political system that is stopping us from making the progress that we need to make. So that is one of those changes we need to look at and address as well.
Absolutely.
Let's let
Arlene.
Tracy jump in here. And
well, I think part of that too is also the localizing of our economy and localizing our relationships and our resources. And that's something that I saw come through, that's been coming through with COVID, that is also applied to climate change. So we can take those behaviors and those actions that are almost in some ways imposed and carry those through to have all the positive impacts on climate change. And, you know, even for us, like we see people, we've had so many people calling us saying, I want to grow my own food. I want to work with my neighbors and grow food. And so, you know, we're distributing compost left and right so that people can have more food security locally, work together. And I'm seeing small, you know, neighborhood scale economies develop as a result of that. So I think there's a lot to be learned. And in some ways we can even, if you look at some of the language out there, you can just use the words interchangeably, like climate crisis, COVID-19, just move the words around and we can, you know, carry the conversation forward in that process. That's something that I was kind of playing with, that interchange of language. And
I think a lot of this all speaks back to the other piece that we're talking about, the connected community. And Jean was talking about how we saw it from so far away and we didn't want to believe it, but the speed at which we found ourselves also facing COVID-19, I think can really advocate for we're a lot closer and more connected than we like to think that we are, and that this is really a group effort to address some of these changes and rebuild the system.
And that made me think of something, Rebecca, is that, you know, we're often told that people won't make the lifestyle changes necessary for this transition that's necessary for a just transition, you know, and out of fossil fuels into renewable energy, et cetera, you know, because it is going to require some change. But we look at how quickly people were able to change in response to this pandemic, you know, and so hopefully maybe that's shifted a little bit of thinking as well. Elizabeth, do you want to jump in?
Change. Well, we're trying to reimagine our film festival for this climate, and but what I have seen is the community come together, and I really like that.
I love what you're doing with it, Elizabeth. I really loved the discussion. You can watch the different pieces of the video and then tune in and like join in discussion about it. And I think that that's a great pivot in this time for the virtual model. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, I definitely recommend.
Yeah, thanks. We're trying to get there.
So
we have a whole crew of people who the advisory members and the board that are just, you know, they're very creative, and we're trying to really reimagine this. And it's kind of exciting. We've got some good stuff coming up. So
we have some folks out there watching on the live stream and some comments, and Mark had one there on factory farming. Would anybody we touched on that a little bit, but would anyone like to go back and say anything more about that?
Well, that's one of the reasons that we started Green Path Veterans Farm, because it was a big surprise to me. You know, we have a very active environmental working group. I mean, we have some people that really know a lot about climate change, and when they were doing their research to do a white paper, which I recommend, it's on our website, Climate Change Urgency and Action. They brought to my attention, which I didn't really have a clue about it, how much factory farming and conventional agriculture contributes to climate change. And so that was an impetus for us to start Green Path Veterans Farms, and to look at a different system to supply us with food. I mean, we have to have reliable food sources, but we don't want a food source that's also destroying our environment at the same time. So we have to think like some of my friends, they talk about spaceship Earth. And that's the way I think we should be thinking.
Right. And Jean, your organization just sent a letter to Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell.
Yes, we did, because we are definitely behind a stimulus package. I mean, people need it. Our economy's hurting. We need to get things moving. But when we get things moving, let's do it with change and make some of these systemic changes that we're talking about. Instead of subsidizing big oil companies and subsidizing fracking, which we know hurts our environment, let's do something positive. Let's stimulate solar power. Let's stimulate local solar power sources. Let's do it a little bit differently. Let's get a tax on carbon or a fee on carbon, and then redistribute that fee back to all of us as a dividend, so that there's a disincentive to use carbon sourced energies. We know what the solutions are. That's the beauty of our country and the creativity that we have. We know with the problems out there, we know it's coming. It's going to slap us in the face. We're already seeing sea level rise on Longboat Key, Siesta Key. You could see sunny day flooding. If you just hang around for a few days, you'll see it. And so climate change, if we don't do something, is coming. So now is the time. This COVID situation gives us the opportunity to change. So it's a crisis and opportunity.
Right.
I think it reiterates, like, I think it's proof for a lot of people that didn't think that we could change or to pivot fast enough that we can. The food banks are feeding way more people than they ever anticipated. Food is moving in new directions. Communities, neighbors are counting on each other. People are picking up groceries for their friends or neighbors or higher at-risk populations to keep each other safe. And so I think this interconnectedness can be a really great example on how we can change a lot faster than we think we could. And it gives us hope, it gives me hope, that these changes to the system that we claim are impossible or take too much work really are still possible, but it'll still take work to get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we're almost out of time. And so I wondered if we just go around and maybe what's your one takeaway, one lesson that you think we need to apply moving forward in terms of addressing climate change?
I think education is really important. And basically that's what we were trying to do, and community. And we're all working together. And I really enjoy working with all the nonprofits. You guys all bring a lot of different ideas and points.
That's exactly right. And I think it's this is an excellent example of what we can do working together. I mean, Arlene, WSLR, in my opinion, is an emerald for Sarasota, because just think about how many places in our country, they don't have any independent radio whatsoever. I mean, if you go, I've traveled before across the country, and in some places it's really sad. The only thing that you're going to hear is commercial, big corporate radio. And so, Arlene, we want to thank you, Transition Sarasota, Waterkeepers. I mean, we are so fortunate in our community, and let's keep working together, and we can make the change.
Thanks, Jean.
And I'll make the difference.
Justin, you want to weigh in?
I was Mike.
You're muted, Justin.
Sorry, similar to what I was saying before, I mean, we can follow science and make really good personal decisions, but also collective decisions that are really going to make a big difference going forward.
I think collaboration, creativity, and making sure needs are met across all sectors for all people will help us move forward. And I hear that coming up in this conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things, Tracy, that you had mentioned when we talked before the live stream was developing this global consciousness, that we are one planet, we are one humanity, moving forward, and not isolating ourselves, and really looking at the global, sure, acting locally, but looking at the big picture, doing some of that long-term thinking you were talking about, Jean. I think it really is an opportunity right now for us to imagine the kind of world that we want to live in. You know, really think hard about that, and then go about organizing to make it happen. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I want to just remind everyone that all of these organizations that are here with us today, Transition Sarasota, Suncoast Waterkeeper, Sunshine Community Composting, the Florida Veterans for Common Sense, the Florida Environmental Film Festival, and of course, WSLR. We're all participating today in the 2020 Giving Challenge. You can go online in just 15 minutes at the givingpartnerchallenge.org website and make contributions of anything above $25 up to $100 will be doubled today. And we'd all appreciate your support. And thanks again for joining us here. And let's do it again sometime.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Great program.
Thanks for having
Way to
me.
go, Arlene. Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.